Et salut tout le monde, aujourd'hui je reçois Eclipse, Vijay de Eclipse. How are you, Vijay?
I'm good, Joestar. How are you? Good to be here.
Very good. Yeah, I'm very happy to have you here. I got a lot of questions. First, can you talk a bit about you, like what you did in the past and how that bring you to build Eclipse?
Sure, yeah. So in terms of my role, I'm the CEO at Eclipse. Eclipse is a layer 2 on Ethereum that uses the Solana virtual machine for execution. So simply put, you can think of it as Solana on Ethereum. And I've been working on Eclipse for the last about year and a half or so. And then prior to that, I've been building in the crypto space for close to about 10 years now. So I got my start at Ripple in 2015. So I left Wall Street for Ripple and was involved in building out the early ecosystem there. And then more recently, I was the head of BD and growth at DYDX and Uniswap. So I spent a lot of time on the DeFi side, and I always find the markets and kind of the capital markets aspect of crypto very interesting. But I've been on the builder side as well for close to about 10 years now. I think for me, the North Star is very much to democratize access to financial services, right? But to do that in a way that actually enables building products that users want to use and that provide good user experiences, right? Because I think a lot of the products in crypto historically have been very kind of focused on an inner audience that maybe has some sophistication and know-how of the specific dynamics of crypto, right? So it's very much an in-group thing. And I think being able to broaden out the market for that by improving performance, improving user experiences is definitely something that I'm very passionate about. So it's something we think about and work on a lot at Eclipse as well.
Okay, I understand. And right now there is a lot of layer 2, and because of the fragmentation, a lot of people are a bit lost because they have to choose. How do you explain what is Eclipse? How is it unique next to other layer 2?
Sure. So simply put, the Eclipse solution uses the Solana virtual machine for execution. So we're the first layer 2 that is bringing the performance and design capabilities of Solana to the Ethereum user and asset base. So you can think about it as the best of Solana and Ethereum. You're getting the performance and feature set of the Solana VM, so things like local fee markets and kind of more customized design capabilities that cater to these high throughput use cases. And then you're also getting access to the user base and asset base of Ethereum, right? Which is still the most interesting out there in crypto, right? So you can think of the performance and capabilities of Solana with the network effects of Ethereum, right? So that's very much the vision for Eclipse and kind of how you can think about it in the near term, right? But zooming out longer term, our goal with Eclipse is to build the first incentive compatible single state machine. So we see kind of 3 pillars to do that, right? The first is local fee markets with the SVM. The second is high throughput, which right now the SVM has TPS in the multiple thousands of transactions per second, right? This is an order of magnitude higher than anything available on the EVM right now. And it's capable of supporting multiple concurrent hotspots, for example, multiple central node order books that are seeing very high throughput of usage, right? So that's the second pillar, is high throughput. And then the third pillar is MEV redistribution. So returning value to app builders and therefore to the ultimate users of those apps. So MEV, of course, is extracted in the world of Ethereum, right? And so being able to capture that and return that to app builders allows them to capture their proportional share of value that they're creating on the network, right? So if you combine these 3 pillars, local fee markets, high throughput, and MEV redistribution, you end up with an incentive compatible single state machine that can support a very wide range of high throughput apps, right? So this becomes a compelling alternative to what you're seeing with the development of app-specific rollups, right? Where a lot of apps now are moving in that direction for 2 reasons, right? One, they want to capture more of the economic value that they're creating and return that to themselves or to their users. And then second is they want unimpeded or kind of unbounded throughput, right? So a good example of this is both DYDX as well as Uniswap, where I previously was, where DYDX went with a Cosmos app chain, and Uniswap has evolved into an app-specific rollup, right? And so those two considerations I mentioned, economic value capture and performance and throughput, factored into those decisions, right? But with this incentive-compatible single-state machine, you provide a alternative to for apps to have to run their own infrastructure, right? And fundamentally become a different business, right? Because building great apps is a very different kind of skill set and company need than building infrastructure, right? And so you avoid having to conflate those by being able to use a solution like Eclipse, which allows you to still capture the benefits of the economic value as well as continue to have that high performance. So that's really what we're going for. You get all the benefits of an app-specific rollup with Eclipse, but you also get the benefits of shared liquidity and network effects and the other things that has really made Solana a great layer one.
Okay, if we can go a bit in details, like some people don't know what is local fee market. How does it work? I know you use also block STM, bring by Aptos, if I'm not wrong. And about app specific, I read that it's app specific sequencing. How everything work actually?
Sure. Yeah. So on block STM specifically, that's actually something that is irrelevant to Eclipse, right? Because it's really we are providing an alternative to that, right? Where if you look at players like Monad and Mega ETH, they're having to leverage that in order to even approach the capabilities of parallel execution that the SVM has. But because Eclipse is natively using the SVM out of the box, we don't need to leverage block STM. So it's not really a consideration for the solution that Eclipse is building. In terms of local fee markets, this is a really unique feature that Solana has had from day one, which kind of allows for the emergence of multiple localized hotspots, right? Where you might see one app that is seeing tremendous usage and another app that's not, right? So you don't want to necessarily punish the app that's not seeing tremendous usage or have to rate limit them in order to provide, in order to kind of manage your overall network, right? So you can kind of have higher fees on one hotspot and not have to have higher fees elsewhere, right? So you kind of get into this account specific approach to fees as opposed to having one kind of generalized environment where a uniform fee has to be applied, right? So you can kind of effectively more efficiently allocate that block space and provide more expressivity in terms of the solution. So specific accounts might get priced higher and others can continue to remain lower, right? So this is a feature native to the SVM, and because Eclipse uses the SVM, we're able to tap into local fee markets as well. Longer term, on our roadmap over the next year, we expect to do some modifications to the fee market to kind of tailor more specifically to what Eclipse is building. So that's an area that we're very actively researching along with Enza and other players in the Solana ecosystem. And then in terms of application specific sequencing, I think this is still an emerging area, right? There's some great teams working on this, like Atlas or Fastlane, and it's an emerging area of research that we've been a big part of. And so our goal is to be among the first to implement AS and bring that into production, right? So this aligns with Eclipse's thesis of being the best place for dApps, where apps can control their own sequencing and therefore the value flow, right? So this gets back to the point of being able to have all the same benefits of an app-specific rollup, but be able to deploy to a more general.
I really like the part of the MEV redistributed, because that's a big subject. A lot of problems come from the MEV. But I wonder, I think you're optimistic rollup. When will you have fraud proof, and when can we see that?
That's right. So right now, Eclipse is an optimistic rollup, right? But we are planning to roll out ZK capabilities. That's something that will happen next year. So we'll communicate more specific timelines and roadmaps around that. But that's an area that our CTO Ben Lifshitz and research team are actively in the process of implementing. And Ben came from ZK Sync, so he was very much involved in the ideation and execution of that. And I think at this point, ZK fraud proofs is very much table stakes, right? So if you look at the evolving kind of broader layer two landscape, the bar for L2s is being raised, right? I think that's a good thing. The importance of evolving to a stage one and then eventually a fully permissionless stage two rollup. So that's something that is definitely a high priority for us to execute on. And I think, it's no longer like optional, right? So I think it's just a matter of like when we and other projects implement it, right? So that's something that we expect to have around the first half of next year. And once you have that, of course, you don't have the 7-day withdrawal or kind of the challenge window. So that's something that we're very excited about.
Is it too early to know if that's going to be a ZK circuit personalized or ZK VM?
So we're still working through the specifics of that, but we'll definitely communicate more about that, right? I think the ZK VM space is definitely interesting. You've got some trade-offs there. It's I think it's an interesting opportunity, but ultimately something that's still kind of a TBD in terms of broader adoption.
Okay, yeah, I understand. And right now I think I've been to your expo and you're about 30-40 TPS. I think that changes every time, but how fast do you think you can go? What's your North Star?
Yeah, so since launch of the Eclipse mainnet, we've had approaching about 1.5 million transactions so far, right? So this is with completely unincentivized activity and purely organic, right? So on average, we've had something in the vicinity of about 30 to 50 TPS. I think at the highest there've been numbers in kind of the hundreds when we've seen like a big spurt of activity. And there's room to go much higher, right? So our goal is to really see a realized TPS of something on the order of 2,000 to 3,000 transactions per second, right? Because that is what the SVM is capable of. So over time, as more apps deploy, we drive users and eventual incentivization as well. You'll start to see that TPS, that realized TPS, increase significantly. So we have much more room to go. And we'll definitely roll out some benchmarking soon as well to really kind of anchor that conversation in the broader discussion.
Okay. And how are you going to incentivize this ecosystem? Do you have some grants or something like this?
Yeah, I think incentives are it's like a very interesting topic of discussion now, right? Like there's ultimately, I think the most important and powerful thing in ecosystem building is to decentralized wealth creation, right? Where you want to reward your early users, your early developers, and then still make the ecosystem accessible to more users to come in over time as well, right? And I think a lot of what we've seen with yield farming historically, yield farming has kind of been like the MO or just the default that a lot of ecosystems have indexed to, right? But I think we're kind of seeing that meta shift as we speak, right? Where if you look at Hyperliquid, there was tremendous product market fit, and then they launched a token, significantly rewarded early users, and then now there's kind of almost a stampeding in from the rest of the ecosystem to not miss out, right? So in that case, like there isn't necessarily a lot of ongoing rewards per se, but it's more just they've created a really powerful ecosystem that people who aren't a part of it want to be a part of, right? And then also with the Pudgy Penguins and other recent launches, really rewarding that early core user base, I think is one of the most powerful things you can do, right? Both that user as well as developer base. So it's something that, Eclipse will definitely do as well. Like, we're very much a community first project and approach. And so although we haven't rolled anything out yet, in the near future, will be kind of an expansion of a game that we recently launched called TurboTap, which is it's a clicker style game that we rolled out a couple weeks back, and right now it's just the game itself. But in the next couple of weeks, that is going to also integrate a lot of the apps on Eclipse, right? So we think that provides a very interesting way for users to participate in the Eclipse ecosystem and really learn about the apps and ramp up on the apps. And so we're not, again, our goal is to really like bring users into the interesting apps being built on Eclipse, right? As opposed to explicitly incentivizing in terms of economic units up front. And so we really want to drive that early alignment. And then over time, we definitely expect to reward early users and developers as well. In terms of grants, I think pay to play is definitely like something that has become, call it table stakes in the industry as well. I think it's encouraging to see some of the shift away from that, or more just market-driven forces as well. And of course, like when you have so many different infrastructure ecosystems, L2s and L1s, and they're all playing the same game, at some point it's like, significantly diminishing returns. And there's only, a relatively limited base of developers to go after, right? So I think it's an interesting opportunity to really just move away from that, and for teams to really go deep on a smaller number of developers that can really build unique things that take advantage of the infrastructure, right? So that's an approach that we're taking at Eclipse, where we're going really deep with a handful of Eclipse ecosystem incubations, Eclipse native incubations, and really helping them go from 0 to 100, right? So providing go-to-market support, team building support, fundraising support that leverages the experience of the Eclipse team and can really help these developers scale up, right? And then we really work with them to build something that takes advantage of Eclipse's capabilities. So I think this approach is really the future, right? And there may be room for grants here or there, but ultimately I think we're going to see a big shift away from, these very broad-based grant programs that we saw in the previous cycle, right? From Avalanche and Arbitrum and others. So they'll have a role, but I think, more diminished, and it's more about creating like a true flywheel of engaged users and engaged developers.
Totally agree. And is there an app that excites you the most? What is, do you have a contact with a team that want to build a killer app, something that changed from Solana?
Yeah, so right now we're working with a couple of game developers to build some really consumer-centric gameplay experiences that tap into kind of a high degree of like virality, right? So leaderboards and it's almost not even you could call these games, but in a large part they're also like financialized consumer experience, right? So in fact, the app I mentioned that we launched recently called TurboTap will be kind of a reference implementation of this, right? Where it's a consumer app where the gameplay itself takes advantage of very high TPS, right? Because it's a clicker game and every transaction is on chain. So that's something that can really kind of push the limits of Eclipse, but also provide some like an interesting funnel to bring in new users, right? So we're working on a couple of incubations that are like that. And then also working with teams that are building Eclipse native DeFi, right? So I think DeFi at this point is table stakes for ecosystems because it's a really great way to drive asset usage and utilization and TVL. And so building a really strong central limit order book experience and a money markets experience, I think is table stakes to kind of grow the broader ecosystem. So we're working with some teams around that as well. There's also, I think launchpads and prediction markets are a more cemented category at this point. So we have a couple of Eclipse native players launching on that front as well. and then also, I think it's worth mentioning, like I think NFTs are definitely resurgent, right? And
Mm.
I think the speed with which that has happened has, frankly surprised me a bit as well. And so we have a couple of anchor flagship collections on Eclipse that have been building out some really interesting ecosystems and really strong community. So the After School Club, as well as the Validators collection. So both of those are, in fact, they're kind of launching other apps and uh, interfaces themselves as well. So I think it's been quite interesting to see the power of those communities kind of multiply beyond just the NFT and kind of the collection experience into other things like apps as well. So we've been helping to support that.
Mm. Yeah, I think memetics is like a big part in crypto nowadays. You guys have chosen a nice mascot. Yeah, I wonder what's your point of view about memetics and how you build all a community.
Yeah, I think memetics and community building is definitely um, the golden goose of this cycle, right? Where
Mm.
I think there's now so much saturation in terms of both infrastructure and apps, right? So it's a lot of it is about how do you compete for mind share, right? Because the audience of crypto natives has definitely grown, but there's now high potential for the audience of a larger, kind of more mainstream audience to grow as well, right? With some of the shifting macro winds. And so I think it's important for teams to spend time thinking about how they're going to stand out in doing that, right? And to date, there's been like a lot of the crypto native, crypto community building playbook, right? Of like um, uh, posting on CT, growing the Discord, but everybody's doing that, right? And so I think it's important to think about how can you stand out, really stand out from the masses, right, and attract that attention. Of course, you have to have something interesting for people to come in and engage with and go from there. But in terms of that top of funnel, being able to convert those initial eyeballs, like that's really, I think, the prize to figure out, right? And so for Eclipse, I think we've done a couple of really unique things there, right? So one is the Turbo mascot, where having a mascot or animal that we can really kind of build around and build an identity around that also leads into our product provides a reference point for everybody, right? It's almost like a cultural pillar. And I think a lot of a lot of crypto products have a version of this, but in many ways it's like it's almost like it's like an insider knowledge, right? Whereas we saw value in having something that is accessible to people, right? Because you want to bring in more people. And so Turbo or Turbo the cow, is something that um, uh, has its own appeal and accessibility. It also has a TikTok account, and we did a stunt last year where we put a Highland cow in a gallery in New York, and that really attracted a lot of attention, right? And it's something totally independent of the crypto native aspect, but it's a great funnel to bring in attention and engagement, and then ultimately convert people who are interested, right? So we thought there was value to doing something much more generally accessible in terms of the branding and mascot, right? And even our positioning of Solana and Ethereum is similar. And then I think the second thing that we did to cut differently is really to have our entire team be active on Twitter, right? Call it team-led marketing, where I think we're really the first to do this, or among the first, where everybody in the Eclipse team has a very interesting background, has done great things before. And so really kind of leaning into that, everybody leaning into their individual identity, and then also talking about Eclipse and the ecosystem collectively has been a really powerful kind of driver for community flywheel, right? Because it provides ways for different audiences to engage. And, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? And so we've really been able to tap into that. So those are examples of a couple things we've done. We have a lot more that we're planning for Q1 of next year too. But I would say, I think the winning strategy has always been to be authentic and to lean into something that feels unique to us that we can execute on.
Mm-mm. Okay, I understand. And I have checked, the just to check the TVL and Eclipse. For now, it's organic, it's growing, but it's quite still shy because, as you said, it's not incentivized. When do you think the big boom could happen on Eclipse?
Yeah, so right now the TVL is, it's something that we definitely will incentivize eventually as well, right? But I think right now we wanted to see what the kind of organic usage was, and I think there's been a lot of attention on Eclipse since we've been able to benefit from that. People started to bridge in even before withdrawals were enabled, right? And so there's kind of that early base of engaged users. In terms of TVL, our goal is definitely to get into the billions of TVL, right? But I think TVL has kind of become like a vanity metric as well, right? Where everybody, eventually everybody incentivizes it in some way, or whether you can earn points or whatever, right? And so it's kind of become, like I was saying earlier about the grants approach, it's become kind of a commoditized game, right? And I think the dimension that matters more is active TVL, right? Like, what is TVL going towards, right? Like, is it going towards actual DeFi apps or SocialFi apps? And then in Eclipse's case, we also have something called TETH, which is a unified restaking token, where you can deposit various liquid restaking tokens as collateral and earn this index token that basically aggregates sources of yield across the LRTs and guarantees you the highest blended return across all those at any given point in time, right? So it's a way for this massive LRT ecosystem to optimize on their yield, right? So that's been a big point of entry for a lot of institutions that are holding LRTs. So that's also capital that we want to direct more towards apps, right? We want those TETH tokens to be actively traded on Orca, or to be put into Solend or Astral, and really kind of see that usage. So that's something that we're working with those apps to really drive, right? And the Eclipse native apps like Astral and others have really also been interested in driving that too. And so I think that's something that you're going to see a lot more of, right? Where these assets get put towards active usage. And that's really the goal, right? Is like, what is the turnover of assets? I think or some ratio of turnover in TVL, right? Because it's really more about what people are doing with the assets. But zooming out, I think for a while all these metrics have become relatively commoditized or saturated, right? Of like TVL, volume, even TPS at this point, right? And so for Eclipse, our North Star is really what we call chain GDP, right? What is the wealth creation effect for users and developers on Eclipse, right? Like, what is the value being returned to them from MEV redistribution? What is the yield that they're earning? And then what is the upside and sort of capital appreciation being generated from tokens launched on Eclipse, right? These are all the various kinds of return sources. And so ultimately, community enrichment, I think, is a really good distillation for a variety of other desired goals as well, right? And so for Eclipse, we very much see that as our North Star, right? Or how can we truly measure the aggregate effect of everything that we're doing?
Okay, I understand. And I wonder, because there is a lot of projects that's coming next year about solving fragmentation. I wonder if being a validator is that a struggle to get a unified liquidity with other layer 2 like Optimism, Base, or Arbitrum, whatever?
Yes. So you're saying is like with the development of app-specific rollups, what happens to liquidity? Does it get fragmented, or what do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, the super chain is going to benefit from a unified liquidity soon, like I don't know, 6 months from now.
Yeah.
Is Eclipse going to benefit later from all this liquidity?
Yeah, so we very much want to participate in broader efforts to kind of aggregate liquidity, right? I think there's going to be a lot of great developments with account abstraction and integrated bridging experiences that help to connect disparate liquidity sources. At the end of the day, there's still kind of the coordination effort of having to drive network effects and users and mindshare to specific apps and the infra they're built on. So I think the solve is, it's not a seamless solve in terms of being able to unify everything that's on base with everything that's on Kraken's app specific rollup or Optimism mainnet, right? So I think there's still friction there, but I think having that unified liquidity is something that is an undeniable trend and something that we want to be a part of, right? But I think in many ways that's going to push chains or infrastructure to lean into what makes them unique, right? So there can be chains that have a desirable asset base that like users from other chains want to get into, right? So for example, there might be some really interesting RWAs on Eclipse that users from other chains want to get into, right? And so then Eclipse could be an asset chain. Or you could be kind of a more user and kind of UX or top of funnel focused chain if you've attracted a lot of users, right? So maybe Eclipse could be that, maybe Base could be that. So I think you'll start to kind of see this like segmentation where a chain has to compete on one of those two dimensions, right? Because once you've enabled seamless money flow across all these different kind of infrastructure environments, it's really about, okay, are you bringing in the users at top of funnel, or do you have the attractive assets that users from elsewhere want to get to, right? So that's kind of, I think in many ways it pushes things out to the edges, and the actual kind of plumbing becomes a little less relevant longer term, right? So do you compete on asset acquisition or user acquisition?
Okay. And about decentralizing the sequencer, is that a goal on Eclipse, or you just want to keep it centralized to get the TPS to the maximum?
Yeah. So for right now, the sequencer set on Eclipse is relatively small, right? And we think there's value to keeping it that way, because ultimately we want to drive high throughput, high TPS, right? And so we're more focused on creating trust and verification and the ability for users and developers to feel comfortable about that sequencer set, as opposed to trying to fully decentralize it in the way that other L2s have, right? And that aligns fundamentally with what Eclipse is trying to do, which is to be a very high throughput layer 2, right? And longer term, you could envision it may even be a possibility of stripping out consensus and having a single sequencer, right? Because these decisions in keeping that sequencer set small is really what enables higher throughput. And so to try and optimize for that third leg of the stool would lead to trade-offs on performance, right? And the fact that you still settle to Ethereum, you're still inheriting the security of Ethereum, right? So you're able to kind of have the best of both worlds. So we're not too focused on decentralizing that sequencer. Yeah.
Okay. And you talk about Ethereum. So you use Celestia as a DA. Do you think there is a world where blobs get cheaper, scale much more, and you just go on blobs, or you think Celestia is still the best DA for your use case?
Yeah, so Ethereum native DA, they're doing some interesting work there. I think ultimately Celestia is continuing to really scale itself, right, with the Mammoth upgrade and just being able to handle a tremendous amount of data. And there's also a lot of power to the ecosystem alignment with the broader Celestia ecosystem and this kind of many roll-up world that they're enabling, right? Like a lot of the ongoing roll-up launches and well into next year will be Celestia based. So there's also a lot of power to kind of that ecosystem alignment, right? And then on top of that, Celestia is a proven player with a track record of execution, right? And has been up and running consistently for a long time now, or at least the longest in terms of LTA solutions, right? And so we have a lot of confidence in that Celestia solution, and I think there's, especially with the Mammoth upgrade and their ability to kind of handle whatever Eclipse is throwing at Celestia in terms of posting data right now, it's been really impressive. And so, I think we definitely envision continuing on that path. And then also just keeping an eye out for what's going on more broadly, right? But like I said, I think between Celestia's ability to handle all the data, because Eclipse is right now the top contributor, right, and posting a large amount of data, which includes transaction hash data and metadata on top of kind of actual transactions, right? But as more apps deploy to Eclipse and users come on and incentives ramp up, that actual transaction data is going to significantly increase as well, right? So the Mammoth upgrade and Celestia's roadmap can definitely handle all that, and the ecosystem alignment is kind of the cherry on top as well. So, I think we're definitely sticking with Celestia for the foreseeable future.
Okay, no problem. And about the roadmap, what it look like in 1 year, in 2025?
You were asking what the roadmap for 2025 is? Yeah. So I think there's a few things. So first off is really transitioning to that stage 1 and stage 2 roll up, right? And becoming kind of fully fledged. So that's something that our core engineering team is working concertedly on. And then I think the next big thing is building out the other parts of what I was talking about with that incentive compatible single state machine vision, right? So MEV redistribution is kind of the key remaining component of that. So that's something that our research team is working on as well, and we'll communicate timelines and roadmap around that shortly as well. So those are, I think the two biggest focuses on the roadmap side, or the engineering side, and what we'll communicate on the roadmap. And then in terms of application-specific sequencing, we're working closely with a handful of teams on that. So hoping to have an update around that for next year as well. So those are kind of the, I think the biggest things that we're thinking about. On the performance point, right? So we still haven't pushed the maximum possible realized TPS of a few thousand transactions per second, right? But as we do that, being among the first to implement Firedancer as a layer 2 is kind of the last piece of what we're focused on from an engineering standpoint for next year, right? Where, of course, Solana L1 is working on this as well. But as a layer 2, it's much easier to implement Firedancer because you don't need to reach kind of an agreement or quorum among the validator set in terms of upgrading the client. So it's something that can functionally be achieved faster with the layer 2. And of course, being able to offer up to 1 million transactions per second is a very interesting vision, right? And no app is really pushing that boundary yet, but to be able to support something like that has the potential to attract a whole new audience of developers that, say really strong Rust devs from Web 2 who just haven't seen the necessary inputs they need to build a game-changing app to date, right? When you offer that level of TPS, you really kind of open up design space. So that's the last thing that we're excited about on the engineering roadmap.
Do you think you can be the NASDAQ of Web3?
Yeah, that's definitely part of the goal, right? I think Solana would say that for itself as a layer 1 too, right? But being able to bring those capabilities over to the world of Ethereum is really kind of the mission statement for Eclipse, right? Where bringing NASDAQ to Ethereum users and assets, because there's still a huge amount of capital that it is in ETH and ERC20 tokens. And the apps on Ethereum are great, right? But Ethereum definitely, like, there's a lot of talk of Ethereum's North Star right now and Ethereum alignment. I think the answer to that doesn't always have to be EVM centric, right? And in many ways, like being able to bring the Solana VM and just a fundamentally different design paradigm can enable a whole host of new apps and things to be built, right? Like that diversity is what can make Ethereum much stronger, right? And even potentially Solana over the very long arc of time can see other VMs or execution environments come in as well. So I think that kind of diversity should be welcomed and just kind of helps to strengthen the base.
Yeah, that's the cool thing with layer 2 is that you can put whatever you want on it. I wonder, I got a lot of questions about people that don't understand why layer 2 are so amazing and why someone should build a layer 2 and not a layer 1. And as you said, you worked with the WDX, that was a layer 1. So I think you're well positioned to reply to this question, why a layer 2 is so nice.
Yeah, so layer 2, I think it really comes down to what a user wants, right? Or where their assets are. So if you're an Ethereum user with a lot of Ethereum assets, then a layer 2 is, a much cheaper, more efficient way for you to be able to interact with apps, right? And tap into the same capabilities that Solana users have had from day one, right? And I think there's, of course, there's bridges out there, right? But being able to do that natively in an ecosystem and to be able to use those assets natively has a lot of power, right? Because there's kind of this tribalism and stickiness to asset bases, right? And potentially there's like large holders of ETH that don't want to necessarily sell that into something else, but want to do something with those assets, right? Earn a return or earn a yield on it. So I think being able to to do things with those assets and to do things that previously weren't possible in the traditional kind of EVM environment, I think is what should be interesting to users in terms of like why an L2 on Ethereum. I think the Solana vision is very much like, they're indexing around the L1. The L1 is capable of much higher TPS, right? But there may be reasons such as developer penetration or just audience expansion for why L2s will make sense on Solana down the line as well, right? And there's already teams thinking about this, and also bringing these VMs to Bitcoin, right? So if I had to kind of distill it, I'd say, of course, it's scale and being able to tap into that scale natively in the ecosystem, and then also there's developer audience, right? Being able to tap into a broader, different kind of developer audience. And then lastly, there may just be some things that you simply can't build in the existing environment, where if you're able to bring in an alternate execution environment, such as the SVM and local fee markets, for example, you can build something that's wholly new. So there's a potential to kind of just like open up new design spaces.
Okay. And earlier I was just asking if you got a stack. Did you plan to do like Zk Sync or Optimism, Arbitrum, or not at all?
Yeah, there's it's something that people have reached out to us about, including exchanges about the Eclipse stack, right? Okay. But I think right now we see a lot of power in just focusing on our core, right? Building a really good general purpose layer 2. And then once we establish that and there's great product market fit there, then we can start to open that up as a broader stack, right? But there are teams that have reached out and we're brainstorming and collaborating with. But I think in terms of a product offering, that's something that we see as kind of more of a later exploration.
Okay. And what will be your advice to someone that want to discover Eclipse and its ecosystem?
Yeah, I'd say, the community is very welcoming and very active on Twitter. It's very community driven, right? The team is very active as well, but the community has started to take on a life of its own too. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot to kind of explore, and the characters on CT are super friendly.
Mhm.
Um, and we've also tried to design the user experience to be very kind of streamlined, right? So if you come into the Eclipse app from the website, you'll see everything that you can do. And then you can also try the Turbo Tap game. And then as we roll out kind of more app experiences through Turbo Tap, you can almost treat that as like a one-stop shop for how to keep up with and try out the various apps deploying to Eclipse.
Mhm.
So we'll have more about that in the next week or so. But yeah, if anybody has any questions or thoughts or feedback, the team is always open. And would love to hear it. Of course, join our Discord, follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter is Eclipse FND on, and yeah, would love to answer any questions, or people want to reach out.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. I just got two last question. Is there a subject I didn't talk about you want to mention?
Um, I think, right now I'm curious, like, what interesting market mechanisms will, like, new market innovations can happen, right? Where so far we've had a lot of it's a lot of the same types of primitives, right? Of constant function AMMs, central limit order books, money markets, and a lot of the apps shipping are some variation around that, or taking an interesting approach to that, right? But
Mhm.
would definitely encourage developers to think about, what wholly new primitives can we come up with here, right? And I think, non-binary prediction markets is an interesting recent one.
Yeah.
Um, and then of course, sports betting is getting larger. So I
Mhm.
think, thinking about market structures and like which ones can be most interestingly applied to some of these new emerging spaces that are getting kind of marketified, right? Or turned into a real-time market, even outside of crypto, I think is a very interesting design space, right? So we're speaking to a couple of developers around that now, and I think that's a super interesting space in general that can also take advantage of what Eclipse does. So if anybody's working on that, or has thoughts on that, I think it's definitely a blue sky area.
Mhm. Yeah. Definitely. Mm. Do you think we could see something like a poly market on Eclipse?
Yeah. So in fact, Polymarket Polymarket is deployed to Eclipse via Skate, which allows kind of traditionally EVM apps to deploy to the SVM, right? So that's
Oh,
going
cool.
live, and so users will be able to effectively, use Polymarket through that experience.
Mm.
Um, and then we also have an Eclipse native prediction market that we're super excited about as well. So I think prediction markets is definitely an interesting area. Of course, you see kind of the spike with the election, and then kind of a
Mhm.
drop off, right? Um, but I think people have really been woken up to the power of prediction markets, right? So super excited to see what Sharp Trade, which is the Eclipse native prediction market, as well as Polymarket do on Eclipse.
Mhm. Totally. I just have last question. It's not about Eclipse really. It's what will be your advice to a young investor or just someone that want to learn about crypto from yourself, like from your experience and everything?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I got in
Mm.
this space in 2015, right? And I think it was a
Oh.
very different environment. Now there's so much out there, right? So I think
Mhm.
it's a really great time to be joining, but also there's so much choice and options, right? So I think really being intentional about who you follow, why you follow them, where you're going for your information and know-how is really key, right? So I'd say maybe just spend some time like exploring CT and the online blogs and resources and major podcasts, and then kind of figure out what's most interesting to you, right? And then start to hone in on like, who are the top 100 accounts you want to follow on CT, and then really start intentionally choosing those information sources. And then I think if you do a good job of that, then you can very naturally go down the rabbit hole and start to follow your interests, right? You can figure out, do you want to focus on development or being a user in DGen, or kind of focus more on the media side? But I think, really thinking about what is interesting and thought provoking in terms of the broader space, and then finding kind of good information sources that are also validated by others, right? Because at the end of the day, there's so much bias in crypto too. So being able to kind of to verify information, or check out a bunch of different sources to kind of stress test that is important too. But yeah, I think it's a great time to join you. There's so many resources out there and so much accessibility, and the wallet and kind of UX experience has gotten so much better.
Yeah.
So it's really a great time.
Okay. Thanks for the advice. It was perfect. So we can close here if you're okay. That was really great. Thanks a lot, Vijay.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jester. I really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Maybe see you another day. Ciao.
Bye.